strange. Leopard seals were masters at this. A slight shadow in the ice was likely a real treat. In each direction, the sheet carried on, seemingly endless, impenetrable. I shivered, not due to the cold. Mentally, I noted where the return point was and hoped they would clear to forming ice often. The notion of a claustrophobic, graceless ascent from the Arctic Ocean scared me. I could imagine myself red in the face, eyelashes frozen, gasping for air that would not come. I made an effort to quell my anxiety. They would not leave me to freeze and die. I had never heard of a scientist being left to freeze or suffocate. I was sure I would not be the first. Only once I had forgotten my primal fears and mastered them did I look down. What I saw startled me. There was nothing. There was no movement, no planes from which the eye could see. This had a more terrible effect on me than if it had been full of specimens. For a moment, my mind ran from me. The passing thought of our terrestrial sentence and our aquatic failures as a species reminded me that I was not well fit for the ocean. If another animal should sense me... I paused the thought. This was pointless mental tolling. I shook my head. It must not happen. Truth be told, I had about 60 minutes before I reached my hypothermic limits of my equipment. I had already spent 2 acclimatizing myself to my new environment. I swam down, each kick of my flippers propelling me through foreign plains. I felt hopelessly vulnerable. Eventually, the visible light dwindled. I left even the vague resemblance of terrestrial life. This was a simple dive, I reminded myself. This had been a training exercise to get me used to diving in the Arctic. I could see why they had insisted. This had a devastating effect on my nervous system. I flicked on my headlight. The snow-like organisms fell around me in such an incredible density. Even an eyedropper full of them could fill a microbiologist's whole week. I entertained my excitement. It was important to focus on the positives. The microorganisms eventually lost their effect on me. Science took a religious fashion after all. One could not dismiss its dogmatic approaches. My coming to the Arctic base had truly been a feverish pilgrimage. It seemed as though my mind had forgotten entirely of its terror. The practice dive had done my psychology well. The ocean floor had grooves, some of which rolled into small hills and other which cut into the floor like ruptures. I carefully followed them, never becoming closer to the ocean floor than I had been to start with. I had almost lost track of time, I chastised myself. It had been maybe 30 minutes in total. I needed to get back to the surface soon. I had allotted time for the decompression while ascending. Then, my eyes readjusted, and I felt my heart tremble. An inexplicable large drop was inches away from where I hovered, suspended in fear. It was a pit, hundreds of meters in diameter. My mind had not the slightest suggestion to how such a drop could have come to be naturally. As I looked into it, I became acutely aware of my headlight. The fingers of my right hand trembled around the switch. I was both terrified to be enveloped in the aquatic darkness or to alert something which dwelled deeper. I decided to swim backwards and face the ledge. To not face what might have come scared me equally so as the darkness. My ape mind would conjure terrible sounds and figures. Each clink of the chitin-armed limbs frightened me, and the blankness of what laid beyond my arm's reach swirled into terrible shapes. Some practice doctors could say that when truly petrified, the brain will spin dozens of untruths. It will show the body whom it inhabits a dozen false alarms and terrible vistas of reality which never were. But I say this with my career in jeopardy nonetheless. Within the bottomless darkness of the drop, there had been a predatory and curious presence. My mind and body were frozen. I had not the slightest will to move or think. The feeling of terror overwhelmed my senses. I ceased being cold. And then, for a fraction of a second, my light found surface within that pit to reflect. I swam and clawed my way through the seemingly thickened ocean. I swam in a diagonal escape to the ice sheet. My mind ceased to recognize the dangers of foregoing the proper measures of decompression. An entity lurked within that pit, one of an unfathomable nature and mass. I, a man of science, prayed to the gods. I wished that the creature would slumber and never be awakened once again. I wished that it lacked the intelligence or curiosity to pursue me. I did not look back, and I did not dare pay any mind to any more noises which carried through the water. My sanity had almost abandoned me entirely. My struggle against the water resistance was primal and without reason or logic. I clawed through that substance, hopelessly, kicking my legs with all the force I could muster. Finally, the ice sheet came back into view. To my dread and my relief, I saw the ice hole. If I were to die, it would be very soon. I cursed all of the scientific practice which had led me to my situation. I vowed to leave the Arctic at once and never return. I could not pause my ascent. I would not. I would rather die from each vessel and cell in my body bursting than losing myself to the madness from setting my eyes upon the entity which surely pursued me. Perhaps some of the gods which I prayed to had been real. I didn't explode, and I made it to the hole after a seemingly endless and panicked ascent. My colleagues hauled my exhausted body, trembling, onto the surface. I barely registered that I was once again with gravity and land. I laid on the ice, shivering and twitching, my body unable to recover from the swirl of hormones and trauma. I gasped for air and hugged my arms around my abdomen. Then I threw up on the ice beside my face. My nose and eyes burned from the acidic bile. "Are you all right?" The voice barely reached me. I felt detached from the world. I could not muster a response. With my heartbeat slowing, I glanced to the hole. My eyes brushed over it for maybe a second, most likely even fewer. An unimaginably horrific cephalopodic eye met mine. An animalistic shriek tore itself from my body. I scurried backwards, the scene becoming more and more horrific as my eyes registered once more. Its mass stretched on for hundreds of meters, and to my greatest horror, within its eyes was intelligence. I share this story in hopes that those with feverish scientific passion which I once shared forget all goals of Arctic exploration. There are creatures which lurk beneath the polar ice which man should not set eyes upon, or they us. I seek to publish my findings in every scientific journal possible. I make it my life's mission to dissuade the pursuit of deep-sea marine exploration. I am truly a husk of a man. My sleep is forever haunted by the God-forbidden creature which I set my eyes upon that day. I live far in the mainland, near no bodies of water, and become petrified at the sight of cephalopodic features. I will take my own life before the turn of the decade. I am sure. My suffering is endless and my torment is excruciating. All those who heed my advice and believe my story. Cease the exploration of the Arctic Ocean. Return home. Be ignorant and well.